Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Future Tech Podcast. It's me, Charlie Sell, Board Director of Major Group, where I get a chance to chat, speak, have open conversations with tech leaders, people passionate about helping young people enter the world of STEM and the different opportunities that lie in front of them. I am really pleased to have Mark Smith with me today. Now, Mark is the outgoing CIO of ITV, and I'm pretty sure everyone listening to this podcast will know who ITV are, one of UK's leading global media companies. And he is starting new pastures of very exciting opportunities, which he may or may not be able to give us too much detail on. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce Mark and, as always, lead in with finding a bit about his career. So, Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Charlie. And hi, everyone. It's a real privilege to be invited along. And I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, great. So let's jump straight in. And Mark, tell us a bit about your story. How did you get into tech and how has it gone throughout your career?
Okay, Charlie. So I'll kind of start where I am now, I suppose, and I'll go right back to the beginning. So, as you say, I'm the outgoing CIO of ITV. I've been with ITV over 10 years now, and it's been amazing. And I'll probably talk a bit more about that soon. But I'm starting a new role in November, which is a really exciting role. Another big UK brand, which you'll all have heard of, but unfortunately, it hasn't been announced publicly yet. So unfortunately, I can't tell you. But watch this space. And that will be November the 1st. I started a new role, so hugely exciting. It's been a long and interesting career, I suppose, now, and I'm probably coming towards the end of it now. But I've always worked in the media industry, which has been fantastic. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that because I think that's really important, actually, the type of company, the type of sector that you choose, based on what your interests are, on your personality. But I'll go into that in more detail. But where I started, so STEM, I think, is where I started, actually. I think I've noticed over my career, a lot of people have entered into the kind of technology space or in the technology careers via alternative methods. You see often, people from a financial background or people from a consulting background getting into big tech roles. I didn't, I did A level in maths, computer science, and physics, and then I went and did H&D actually at the time, like a diploma in electronics, and then a degree in IT. So I've really come from the tech background. I've always been into tech. My dad bought me my first computer, and it was a big expensive one. You couldn't buy things like Macs in those days, and I loved it, and I got straight into programming. So I did start, from a STEM background, from an education background. I think one other thing that I was keen to just say as well is that I suppose I'm from a relatively kind of working class background. Nobody in my direct family had ever been away to university. I was definitely the first person in my family to go, and my extended family to go away to university. And not many people from my school, if I'm honest, went to university. So, and and I don't want anyone to feel sorry for me here, but I just wanted to bring that point out. I think STEM, to me, was a way that I could get into a really interesting career. The thought of me from my background at the time going in to become a doctor or even an accountant, those kind of things probably seemed really tough, actually. But the STEM world, the engineering and IT world didn't feel quite so difficult for someone from my background. It's just something I wanted to kind of point out. So anyway, yes. So I went away to university. I got my degree. I got a graduate training role, actually, which again I think is something. Yeah, but two things actually. I did a sandwich course. That really helped, I think, because so when I say a sandwich course, a 4-year degree rather than the 3-year degree, and you have the third year out in industry. And I actually did my third year in industry, working for BT. And learned loads in that year, and actually I ended up getting a graduate training role with BT when I left university. Through, I suppose, my connections and my experience working there. So that's something I would definitely recommend for somebody looking to do a degree in a STEM project. That year in industry is really, I think, really, really important, because everything can become a little bit theoretical, and I learned so much about careers and org structures and just the way that the whole kind of work world works during that year out, and it enabled me to have a better idea of the kind of stuff I wanted to get into, I think, when I finished. So that was the education over and done with. I graduate training scheme, BT, brilliant grounding, loads. I was a software developer and systems integration expert, and I suppose really immersed myself in the tech for a number of years, and that was cool. And then managed to get myself onto a kind of joint venture project, actually, with BT. And I was working in actually with BT's kind of national research centre, where things like radar and those kind of things were invented back in the day, and they were doing this really interesting project, and it was all around putting video signals over optical fibres, which at the time was like, wow, that's cool. Now, that's broadband, isn't it? That's what we all just think of, getting Netflix over broadband. But at the time, it was a new thing. And those kind of things excited me. It was new challenges. And I think another thing that's, been all through my career is customer facing industries. Something I like now to go to the pub, and if somebody asks me what I do, I can say I work for ITV, I work for the BBC, I work for Sky, and people know that brand, and they know maybe some of the products that you've worked on. I think that's always been quite important to me. So I got involved in this joint venture project, which was all about, it's called interactive TV. So it was, I suppose, a forerunner of, a lot of things like, kind of online betting and those kind of things, where you could press a red button on Sky Television and you could actually, order a pizza, or, that kind of stuff had never been done before. And it was so exciting at the time. So I got involved in that. I ended up working for Sky TV right at the beginning of their, kind of big launch of the new Sky digital products. This was, still kind of 20 years ago. Massive, exciting time. Great company to work for. A company that weren't worried about cannibalizing their own products. They were constantly bringing new products to market. Got to find out all about cool stuff like, kind of agile software engineering and product development, product management, marketing, all of those really kind of exciting things, which again, are second nature to most kind of software teams now, but definitely weren't at the time. We felt we were really on the cutting edge of all that cool stuff. So Sky for years, and I suppose at Sky I got into team management, and this is where it comes back to people. I think I always found that, I suppose I'm quite a personable person. I'm quite a sociable person. I like to work with people. A lot of people don't. You can do. Some people are very introverted, like to work on their own. Especially, I think, in the software engineering world. And some people are more extroverted, like working as teams and being part of something bigger. And I think I was always that latter. So I enjoyed working with people. And I think that's really, really important as well. Being able to work with people. You have to work in teams nowadays. You have to work with neighbouring teams. You have to work with suppliers. You have to work within the industry. And I think that's really, really important. So I think out of that, I started running quite large software engineering teams, and gradually started going up that career ladder through that route, I suppose. But I was also really keen when I was at Sky that there were other routes, and I worked quite a lot with the HR teams around, if you are just a tech guy and you didn't want to manage big teams, is there still a career path there? And most companies now, I think, do have those kind of routes as well. You can either go up the team management kind of hierarchy, or you can be the best tech guy and still have a career within the companies. And I did a lot of work, as I say, with the HR team at Sky. Anyway, moving on. BBC, always wanted to work for the BBC, big brand. Also, big content. The kind of shows I was watching at the time were mainly on the BBC. I was really, and I grew up with the BBC, and they had this cool thing at the time, that a new product they were working on called BBC iPlayer, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. And I was really keen to work with it. And they were, I knew they were using cool tech. I knew they were using great processes. There's some great people working there. So I got pulled in and I went to work for them. And I ended up working and running the iPlayer team for it on an interim basis, but kind of running the whole iPlayer team, learning about how the BBC work, which was an interesting challenge. I'm interested in organisations and culture and all of that kind of thing. And ended up actually a bit of international experience as well. Kind of, I launched a pilot of the iPlayer in 10 or 11 different countries around the world. This was before new products like BritBox, which I'm sure I'll talk about in a minute. But so lots of international experience, which was fantastic as well. That whole kind of cultural experience, how these kind of things work in different countries was amazing, and I really enjoyed that. And then ITV, and I've been at ITV, say 10, 12 years. As I say, I'm on the process of leaving. I've had a great time at ITV. It's a fantastic kind of media company to work for, and obviously a big, iconic institution within the UK. The thing I quite liked about ITV when I joined it is they were probably miles behind the other companies I've worked for from a tech perspective. And that, again, it's a challenge. I'm up for challenges, and I thought, such a great brand, such great, kind of archive of brilliant content. They make such great shows, but the tech's a bit rubbish. And it was at the time, and I think everyone admitted that. And so I came in, and I suppose, been on a journey of transformation within ITV, which culminated really in probably the launch of ITVX at the end of last year, which, I think has universally been pretty well accepted as something that can really compete with the other big streaming platforms. But believe me, it wasn't just about the ITVX UX. It was really about, kind of all of the kind of processes below it, the advertising processes, the content processes, even the financial systems, everything had to change. So I always think of ITVX as the tip of the iceberg with all of the other stuff we had to do. So it was a real journey, and I loved it. And amazing people, and I think that I'll come on to this again. I've worked with some brilliant people. I think my personality is really well suited to the media industry. So yeah, I've always worked with fantastic people, and that's been really important. And as I mentioned up front, I'm due to take that next challenge up in
Yeah,
November, which again I'm really looking forward to. Not
yeah,
directly within the media industry, but a neighbouring industry, which I was quite to do, an adjacent industry, and a company, but again with I think a big tech and cultural challenge
yeah.
on their plates, which is again what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, well, and what a journey, and it's so enlightening speaking to people when, especially when their backgrounds aren't maybe the traditional, as you said. If you're on the first of the immediate family to go into education and decide where you wanted to go, but what resonates so clearly speaking to you is that your love and energy for the subject matter, and you've clearly stayed loyal to following a pursuit of whether it's the industry and the job of passion, and you actually enjoy it, and you didn't not sell your soul, but you didn't follow an industry that could have perceivably pay more money or do different things. It's clear you've followed where a passion is, and we were speaking just before the podcast, weren't we, about what you are passionate about, and without blinking an eye, you were talking about people and culture, and how important it is, and that I can see firsthand that's you through and through. So maybe tell us a bit more about that belief system. When you've been building your teams over the years, when you've been looking at who succeeded, how important is people and culture and those sort of those personality traits?
Right, I'll think this through to see if I can structure the answer in a way. I think you're dead right. The whole kind of people and culture bit is really important to me. I think one thing I will say is, if you really want to enjoy your career rather than just go through the motion or just earn lots of money, money was always important to me. I want protected people that say it's not, it was, but it wasn't the most important thing. I wanted to work in an industry that I could relate to, an industry where I personally could feel comfortable, an industry that would challenge me both kind of technically. I'm interested, as I said, in consumer facing products, and that was all there. So I think that is really, really important. The people bit, especially, I think. But first of all, when you're kind of new to an industry, you haven't necessarily got a team of your own. I think just being able to work with people is really, really important. There are not many roles around now where you can just go off and do your own thing for 3 months. You have to be able to work with other people, listen to other people's perspectives, and be able to work as a team. That is critical to anybody. Yeah. So I think that's the first people thing. The second thing, which probably comes to when you maybe start to kind of build your own teams, is that you do have some kind of say over the kind of people that you want to work with, and there's probably a couple of bits to that. One is, and I'm going to steal this from a very good colleague of mine who I won't mention, but it's not my phrase, but he always had this phrase of smart and kind, which I always loved. Yeah, we need really, really smart. He used to say, Mark, we need really, really smart people to do this really tough, complex stuff that we're going to do, but they need to be kind and they need to be able to work with people. They need to get on. And I've always kind of stuck with that mantra, be smart and kind, and get smart and kind people around you. And I think, ITV has been great for that, and the BBC actually. And I think the media industry encourages that kind of, culture. So the smart and kind thing I really like. But you also need to build teams with a kind of mix of people as well. And I think this is becoming more and more important, the concept, and I probably led a lot by the kind of diversity and inclusion agenda, which is big and massive and something I've always been hugely supportive of. Trying to build that really kind of diverse team, I think, is so important, because when you get diversity, you get different viewpoints and you get challenging conversations and you get challenge. Really, really important. So the whole kind of D&I thing is really important. So being able to work with lots of different people from different backgrounds, and with different challenges and different opportunities. So I think that's all good, important from the people perspective. Culture, I'll just move on to culture quickly for a bit, because and a couple of things around culture, and I said this a bit up front, is I kind of in the way I didn't just kind of I didn't just kind of go into the media industry. I did have a bit of a plan. I worked for a big company like BT, and they work across all industries basically. I kind of headed for the projects that were involved, that were around the media industry, because I could see that was somewhere where I'd really like to work. And I think it is important. You need to almost, and you may not know this up front, but I just had the feeling, and from what I knew about the media industry, it excited me for one, but also, I got the feeling that's the kind of place I'd really like to work, and it turned out it was. I probably could have gone into a bank or financial institutions and probably earned more money, and but I didn't see myself there. So I think that's something about choose a company with the right culture. I think is quite important. Maybe try a few out, and and then jump to the one that you want. Um, Another thing about culture, which I've found through my career, is and there's loads, if you read kind of management or leadership books, there's loads of great phrases about this. But I think culture is so important when you're trying to change things. I talked about launching ITVX recently. The toughest piece of that whole launch wasn't about building a great product, a user-facing product that people would love. It was about changing the whole mindset of a 60 or 70-year-old business that had been stuck in doing things in a certain way, which was making great shows for 9 o'clock on ITV1. And that's true, and the idea is actually, no, now it's all about streaming, and it's not about changing the front end product. It's about changing the whole process for how you commission shows, how you make shows, how you build shows, and so that, changing it was turning a tanker a bit, but it was about changing the culture of a business more than just building products. So culture comes in a huge number of ways, but I think, kind of find something that fits your culture, and then be prepared as the tech guy or the tech person to get involved in all of that side of things as well, and I ended up running a lot of the diversity. I ran actually the disability network at ITV as part of the diversity inclusion, and I absolutely loved, and I met some of the greatest people. But I think don't be afraid to get involved in all of those extracurricular type and cultural things that every big company will run now, and actually even small companies. I think just get involved in those kind of things, as well as just being the tech guy who's getting to do. You can do great tech stuff, but get involved in other parts of other initiatives within the company as well. And
Mm.
the last thing on company thing, am I rambling a bit, Charlie? Please tell me if I
No,
am.
this is perfect. Please carry on.
The other thing about a company is get to understand the business. I think, and this is something that I've always, I don't know, perhaps I didn't really get, and now I do get. And I think if you really want to build a career, you need, especially nowadays, you need to understand not just the tech, but the business and how the business works. What's the business model? What's our go-to-market strategy? What could we do different? What's our innovation strategy? And I think, especially, I've been lucky enough to be on the management board of ITV for the past 5 years, and most of the conversations we have there are not about tech, as you could imagine. They're about what products are we going to bring to market? What's the go-to-market strategy? How do we do the transformation of the company? So I think just really understand the business as you're getting into, and be prepared to get involved in some of the business conversations and not just the tech conversations.
Yeah, and Mark, this is brilliant because it's so clear. That phrase, be smart and kind. I just could not agree with you more. You can, if you only have one side of that equation, you're missing a trick. You can be the smartest person in the room, but if you do not have that empathy and the ability to be able to build relationships and understand other viewpoints, your career is limited. And obviously vice versa. You might be the most empathetic person in the world, but if you don't invest in your own education or your own understanding of complex problems, you'll also have a ceiling.
Yeah,
So I think that those two words alone is what will allow someone to go from a very captured job role to actually the world is your oyster if you're smart and kind. So yeah, your colleague, I think, he coined that very, very well.
yeah, yeah. No,
And
I've always stuck with that. Yeah, it's something I live by without a shadow of a doubt.
yeah, yeah. And I also loved what you said about the extracurricular activities as well, because and the fact that you're passionate about the diversity agenda and being involved in different parts of it, because a big reason for this podcast is to help promote STEM subjects or STEM careers to young people who wouldn't normally feel that there's a career available to them in that industry. And that's the big problem, especially with technology. is that there is actually quite a wide, diverse background of people who study science, engineering, maths at school. But for some reason, when it comes to them doing their first careers, a huge proportion will go into sciences or medicine or research, and we lose a huge talent pool of diverse young people, different economic backgrounds, different neurodiverse. And so to hear that you're saying that actually, there are those communities within large, and the media world, I suppose, probably facilitates it better than other industries, that there is an open playing field. You can be recognized and you're not going to be ostracized if you are disabled. There's a committee, that there is a place to allow you to excel. That's music to my ears,
And I
and
think,
credit
Charlie,
to
just
you.
on that, I think, and most people will know this, but, it's been something I've realized over the last 10 years, especially, is that every big company is so heavily reliant on tech, more heavily reliant on tech than it ever has been before. There is not a single company out there that hasn't got some really interesting and really senior roles around tech. Also, over the last 5 to 10 years, one other thing I've noticed, most CTOs or CIOs 10 years ago, 15 years ago, weren't on the management board. I've been there myself. I was a CTO reporting into the CFO or the director of strategy or something, and then I got promoted. I've reported to the CEO. My new role, I'll be reporting into the CEO. I've even known a lot of CTOs recently have actually taken on CEO roles, yeah, because the company is so heavily dependent on tech. It's the most important thing. So I think in the past it was like, oh, maybe I can go the accountancy route, or I can go the legal route, or I can go or I go a research route, and there'll be more opportunities for me. I don't think there's any sector now where there's more opportunities than there is,
Yeah.
for people with really good tech backgrounds. So I think the world has really opened up from that perspective.
Yeah, and again, I just couldn't agree with you more there. And it's that's the excitement, isn't it? That's where we're going. So time always flies when I speak to passionate people like yourself, and we're now coming to the bit of the podcast where, can you give us a bit of just one or two tips, that your bit of career advice, our young listeners who hopefully have been inspired about realizing, wow, there is opportunities, and someone like yourself has been so successful, um, and had a diverse background yourself in regards to education. What what one or two bits of advice would you give to our young people who just want to get a foot in the door, stand out from the crowd, be able to, yeah, get above the parapet?
I think what I'm probably going to do, Charlie, rather, because I think I've mentioned a few things that are really important. So
Yeah,
what I might try and do is try and pick out two or three things that I've already mentioned and maybe build on it a little bit. But which one shall I start at? I think I talked right at the beginning, didn't I? If you're doing a degree, that idea of doing a sandwich course, and then there is such a diversity of different types of role in the tech space now. I think especially with things like product management being and marketing being so closely related to technology nowadays, and also data is another big one there that I haven't mentioned yet. All the data roles, data engineering, data analysts, data scientists, all of those kind of really interesting roles. So I think that is one tip. Just there are you're not just it's not just about coding, and I think a lot of people think, oh, that's coding, that's a bit maybe geeky for me, but I think you just try and understand, either by your course at university, or doing a sandwich, or even within your first role, the diversity of different types of tech related roles out there, and then try and see which one is really going to float your boat, and don't just get stuck in one that's not really for you, I suppose. So I think that's probably one piece of advice. I've got to go back to the smart and kind thing, I think, because that is, as you said quite rightly, Charlie, you can be as smart as you like, but if you can't get on with people and work as part of a team, that's tough, and you're probably going to be a lot. There are still routes for people like that, the more introverted people that just want to be, but you are closing off a lot. Yeah, so I think just be able to listen to people, be open minded, be conscious of the people you're working with, who might not be exactly like you for whatever reason, and I think being able to work as part of a team, and is really really important to people going forward. I think so that's so important. I think this is something I probably haven't done, but I know Yeah, I've stuck at companies for quite a while. I've kind of 6, 7, 10, 12 year, 10 years at companies. And I think now there's the opportunity probably to jump around a bit more. And I think especially early in your career, I think don't be afraid. Of if it's the culture's not for you, or the role's not for you, or the location's not for you, or they're not flexible enough for you. I think don't be afraid to jump around. I think especially from a tech perspective, companies need good tech people and good data people and all of that. So, I think don't be afraid to find the right fit for you, whether that's the right cultural fit, the right role fit, etc. I think, don't be afraid of that.
Yeah.
And a last one, and then, feel free to, I think, don't be shy at coming forward. And perhaps that's something I suffered. And I don't know why that is, whether it's just my kind of nature or my background or whatever, but when I look back over my career, there were people probably not as well qualified as me who were putting themselves forward for stuff. Whether that is getting involved in the extracurricular stuff. I mentioned around diversity and all of that kind of stuff, or even thinking you're not good enough to go for promotion. I think just be confident and go for stuff and put yourself forward and make yourself visible. I think is just really good. And I probably shied away a little bit from that. I think especially early in my career and I think about that quite a lot. So I
Yeah.
think just make yourself visible,
Yeah.
without being the big kind of all hands showy off, because that's probably not good actually.
Yeah.
Because that can have the opposite impact sometimes. But I think just put yourself out there a bit. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, and that last point, I just think that will resonate to so many people, because I think one of the challenges within tech, and thank you for being open about that, and within industry, and what we look at is, and this goes back to the gender challenge, where traditionally men will tend to put themselves out there more than females for reasons of how they view
yeah,
job roles and opportunities. And actually, if everyone had that confidence to be able to say, you know what, let me try, let me strive, and that goes across the whole spectrum of people. That's something as businesses we've got to promote, but individuals, that confidence to say, let me, without being the big I am, or breaking relationships, that still keeping your kindness. um, I think that really is a great point. And for many people sitting here who probably might have thought it was easy, for someone like yourself, we're both here as in privileged positions, but actually that same insecurity can also be there, but you've got to be able to put yourself out there. So I think that's a really good point.
yeah. No, 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 definitely. And we talked a bit about kind of the diversity thing, and I think having more diversity in tech, I think especially, I've done a lot of work around, kind of girls or women in tech. There are various bodies out there that are doing an amazing job, and I've always supported them wherever I've been. And I think we've made a big difference in that, from that perspective, just from the gender perspective. I really do. In the whole kind of tech world, and I see a really good example. We do a graduate training scheme at ITV. We take on 7 or 8 graduates from various different universities to go into the tech graduate training scheme every year. And I must admit, in the early days, and we just started it 7 or 8 years ago, it was mainly lads or boys that, it wasn't anyone. I think last year we had, I think, 1 guy and 6 girls, so the world is changing there as
Yeah,
well. And I think, and I think people are paying a lot more attention to this. And I think,
yeah.
and all of the teams that I've ever worked in that have got that gender balance have always been better teams.
Yeah, and that's another undeniable fact. Data backs that up, let alone
Yeah.
views of culture and wanting just to be a diverse business. So, Mark, thank you. This has been such an interesting episode, and as I say, the passion you have for the space, let alone the advice you've given, I think just really really resonates. And so, from on behalf of Future Tech Podcast, Mark, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Charlie. I've really enjoyed it.
And to our listeners, that's another episode of the Future Tech Podcast. As many of you know, it's shared with the STEM Ambassador Association, as well as on our website, and shared on Spotify. So this is another episode of Future Tech. Thank you for people who are listening to this show. And once more, thank you to Mark for being a guest.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Charlie. Good to see you.